My name is Olivia. I'm a cleaning lady at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. People walk past me every day without even noticing I exist. Dressed in my blue uniform, always with my hair tied back and a sweaty face. I'm just part of the furniture to them. That never really bothered me. Until that day. Just an ordinary day, a cold morning, and a strange old man sitting alone in the lobby. He looked lost, nervous, and no one could understand him. He only spoke German. And I, the invisible cleaning lady, was the only one who understood every word. No one at the hotel knew my mother was German. She taught me the language when I was a child, before she passed away. I kept that to myself, like a secret inheritance. That day, when I offered him tea and simply said, "Möchten Sie einen Tee?" his eyes welled up with tears. That was the moment my life started to change, though I didn't realize it yet. If you've ever felt invisible, if you believe that even the smallest gestures can change destinies, then subscribe to the channel. This story is for you. And with your support, we can keep bringing stories that deserve to be told. It was a morning like any other at the Empire Crest Hotel, the kind of place where the furniture shines more than the people, and every employee learns how to smile without soul. As usual, I was already in the hallway by 6 o'clock sharp. The air was heavy with the mixed scent of disinfectant and vending machine coffee. I pushed my cleaning cart into the main lobby, ready to wipe down the front glass doors. But something was off. There he was. A man with an elegant yet worn-out appearance. He had a quiet presence, as if he didn't quite belong in this time. Tall, with neatly combed white hair, he wore a dark grey overcoat with a wool collar and held an aged leather briefcase that looked as old as he did. He stood in the middle of the lobby, glancing around like he was searching for something he couldn't quite explain. People walked past him like he was a statue, an object not demanding attention. Suddenly, he stepped up to the front desk. Claire, the receptionist, who always acted superior just for working behind the counter, looked up with her usual fake smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" He hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a thick accent. "Guten Morgen. Ich suche ein Zimmer und ein Mädchen. Vor vielen Jahren. Sie war hier." Claire furrowed her brow and took a step back. I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand. Do you have a reservation?" He tried again, now gesturing with his hands, desperate. "Sie war meine Tochter. Vor Jahren. Ich war nicht da." His voice trembled. His desperation was clear. Claire turned to me, irritated, as if looking for someone to dump the problem on. "Olivia, you getting this?" I froze, stayed silent for a second. My heart raced. Those words, they sent me straight back to my childhood, hearing my mother sing in German while doing the laundry. I hadn't spoken it fluently in years, but I understood exactly what this man was saying, and I felt something else, a kind of pain that only those who've lost someone can express. I approached him slowly. "Entschuldigen Sie, möchten Sie einen Tee?" I asked softly, almost whispering like testing something long asleep. He stopped, stood still. His blue, crystal-clear eyes met mine. For a moment I thought he would cry right there. "Sie sprechen Deutsch?" he asked in disbelief. "Ein bisschen, meine Mutter war Deutsche," I replied with a shy smile. Claire looked at me like I had just spoken in secret codes. "Wait, you speak German?" "A little." "Enough, I think," I said, without taking my eyes off the man. He pulled a photo from his pocket. An old black-and-white picture, corners worn and folded. He showed it to me. A young woman with dark hair, smiling beside a doorway with the hotel name in the background. "Sie war hier, meine Tochter. Ich habe sie verloren. Vor 30 Jahren." My throat tightened. He was looking for his daughter, lost or missing for decades, and he'd chosen this hotel as his starting point. "Kommen Sie mit mir. Ich mache Ihnen einen Tee," I said, inviting him to sit down. He nodded silently, eyes still fixed on the photo, as if it might somehow take him back in time. As I walked toward the kitchen to get the tea, I heard Claire whisper to the manager, "Who is that old guy? And since when does Olivia speak German?" I didn't care. For the first time in years, my voice carried weight, and it all started with a cup of tea and a few words I had never forgotten. The hotel kitchen was hot and noisy, but at that moment everything around me seemed to fade into the background. I was preparing tea the way my mother used to on cold days. Fresh chamomile leaves with a touch of honey, water at just the right temperature, and a porcelain cup I found forgotten in the back of a cabinet. It was a simple gesture, but full of memories. As the water heated, I relived the afternoons spent with my mother, speaking German while peeling potatoes or folding laundry. I returned to the lobby with the steaming cup in my hands. The man was still standing, looking out the large glass window of the lobby. His briefcase hung loosely from his left hand. When I approached, he turned toward me with a gentle expression. "Vielen Dank. Das ist sehr freundlich von Ihnen," he said, giving a slight nod. "Bitte schön," I replied, offering him the tea. "Setzen Sie sich." He slowly sat down on the leather sofa. The silence between us was comfortable. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He held the teacup carefully, as though afraid it might break. "Ich heiße Olivia. Und Sie?" I asked, trying to soften the moment. "Mein Name ist Friedrich. Friedrich Weiss," he replied with a faint smile. "Ich komme aus München." "München. Meine Mutter war von dort," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. He looked at me with surprise. "Wirklich? Ihre Mutter war Deutsche?" "Ja. Sie ist gestorben, als ich 17 war." He lowered his eyes respectfully. "Es tut mir leid." We sat in silence for a few seconds. The ticking wall clock echoed softly. Then he pulled out the photo again from his briefcase. This time, he handed it to me. "Das ist Emily, meine Tochter. Sie war 16, als ich sie das letzte Mal gesehen habe," he said, his voice shaking. "Ich war ein schlechter Vater. Ich habe sie verlassen. Und jetzt, ich weiß nicht, ob sie noch lebt." I looked at the image. The girl had large, sad eyes, her dark hair tied in a simple bun. She was standing at the hotel entrance, right where I used to wait for the bus after my night shift. The date on the back was 1992. "Warum glauben Sie, dass sie hier war?" I asked, confused. He took a deep breath. "Ein Brief vor ein paar Monaten. Anonym, nur ein Satz. Emily arbeitet im Empire Crest." My heart skipped a beat. Emily. That name sounded familiar. I'd seen it before in old employee records, maybe even on name tags stored in the supply room, but it was too soon to say anything. "Ich werde versuchen, etwas herauszufinden," I promised. "Aber ich brauche Zeit." He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Sie sind der erste Mensch, der mir zugehört hat. Danke." A lump formed in my throat. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment for decades. "Trinken Sie Ihren Tee. Wir finden Sie zusammen." And in that moment, unintentionally, without planning, I became part of something far greater than I ever imagined. This wasn't just a search. It was a rescue. In the days that followed, Friedrich started showing up every morning in the hotel lobby, always in his wool coat, always with the same leather briefcase and the photo of his daughter tucked into the inside pocket. He arrived early, before the guests came down for breakfast, and sat in the same armchair as if he were waiting for Emily to simply walk through the front door. While the other staff avoided him or whispered behind his back, I found myself growing closer to him each day. I brought him tea, we exchanged a few words in German, and I listened. Friedrich didn't speak much, but when he did, his words felt like pages from an old diary. He told me about his youth in Munich, his marriage to an American woman, the messy separation, and how he lost contact with Emily when she was still a teenager. "Ich war feig. Ich habe mich versteckt. Jahrelang," he said, staring out at the street beyond the glass. "Aber ich konnte sie nie vergessen." On the fourth morning, something different happened. I was cleaning the glass doors at the entrance when the hotel manager approached me. Mr. Jenkins, a stiff man who only came downstairs when something serious was happening. "Olivia," he said, arms crossed, "can you explain what you've been doing with that man every day? I'm just helping him. He's looking for someone who might have worked here. You're serving tea to strangers, chatting off the clock. That could be a problem. He's not a threat, and he's not a guest. He's just lost." Jenkins sighed, impatient. "Just don't stir up trouble. This hotel has a reputation." I returned to the lobby furious, trying to hide the tremble in my hands. Friedrich noticed something in my expression. "Ist alles in Ordnung?" "Ja, nur mein Chef, versteht nichts," I replied, sitting beside him. He smiled, as if he'd seen that kind of thing before. "Manche Menschen sehen nur, was sie sehen wollen." Then, right in that moment, he pulled an envelope from his briefcase and handed it to me without saying a word. "Öffnen Sie es zu Hause," he said firmly. "Was ist das?" "Ein Angebot." I looked at him, puzzled, but I nodded. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and finished my shift with my heart pounding. That night, in my tiny one-bedroom apartment, with dim lights and the kettle whistling on the stove, I opened the envelope. Inside were two things, a handwritten letter and a blank check. The letter read, "Olivia, you listened when no one else would. Now I need more than tea. I need real help. Help me find Emily. I want you to be my interpreter, my guide, my voice in this country. I'll pay you what's fair. I trust you." I froze. Me, a simple cleaning lady, holding a blank check, and an invitation that could change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I held that check as if it were made of glass. No one had ever placed that much trust in me before. I didn't have a degree, I didn't speak perfect German, and I had no idea how to find a woman who'd vanished decades ago. But for the first time I was seen. I mattered, and that meant more than anything written on that piece of paper. The next morning I arrived at the hotel even earlier than usual. Friedrich was already there, sitting with his usual calm, patient expression, as if time wasn't in a hurry. I walked over, sat beside him, and placed the check on the table in front of us. "Ich nehme es nicht das Geld, aber ich will helfen." He looked me in the eyes, serious. "Ich bestehe darauf. Es ist kein Almosen. Es ist Vertrauen. Dann machen wir es gemeinsam," I said with a smile. From that moment on, everything changed. We were no longer a cleaning lady and a strange guest. We were partners. We started where it made the most sense, the hotel's old records. I got permission to access the archives in the basement, a dusty place full of boxes and forgotten papers. Friedrich came with me every time, even when the stairs creaked under his weight, and the smell of mold made him cough. "Dies erinnert mich an mein Büro in den 80ern, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. We combed through old staff lists, payroll sheets, handwritten contracts, and then we found it. An old yellowed ID badge with the name Emily Weiss. No, she had worked in the laundry room for just 3 months, from June to September of 1992. "Sie war hier, wirklich hier," he whispered, eyes locked on the badge. But there was more. A note stapled to her file with a rusty clip, left without notice. "Never returned to collect final paycheck." "Warum?" he murmured. "Warum ist sie gegangen?" I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. Emily had been there, and then she was gone. That afternoon I took Friedrich to my neighborhood. He wanted to see where I lived, what my world looked like. I thought it was odd, but he seemed to need a glimpse of real life away from the polished hallways of the hotel. We walked the narrow streets, past crooked lampposts, cracked sidewalks, and the smell of fried food in the air. "Sie sind stark," he said as we climbed the stairs to my building. "Und sie erinnern mich an Sie." "An Emily?" He nodded. "Stark, klug, stolz." I opened the door to my small apartment. Everything was modest but clean. He looked at the old photos on the wall, me as a child, my mother smiling next to a makeshift Christmas tree. "Ihre Mutter, sie war schön." "Ja, und allein, so wie ich." He sat on the old couch and for the first time spoke without holding back. "Ich habe Emily nicht verteidigt. Ich habe meine Frau gehen lassen, weil ich zu feige war. Und dann habe ich zugesehen, wie mein Kind aus meinem Leben verschwand. Ich habe nie gekämpft. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the guilt in every word. Aber jetzt kämpfen Sie, I said, placing my hand on his. And there we were, sitting side by side in the cramped living room of a modest apartment, two very different worlds colliding. A man trying to make peace with the past, a woman learning that the present can still be changed. Friedrich started coming to my apartment more often, not as someone invading my space, but like someone who had finally found a safe place. We had turned my small living room into a miniature investigation center. The walls were slowly covered in old photos, scribbled post-it notes, and photocopied hotel records. It was a quiet, intimate kind of chaos, and in a way, it was beautiful. But something else was growing between us. Something I couldn't explain, between the conversations, the quiet moments, the lingering glances. I felt this wasn't just about finding Emily. There was something in Friedrich that touched me deeply. Maybe it was his loneliness. Or maybe it was the mirror he held up to me, two broken people trying to make sense of their stories. One afternoon, after hours of analyzing the names of former employees who had worked with Emily in 1992, Friedrich stood up from the couch with a determined look in his eyes. Ich will, dass du mit mir kommst. Wohin? Nach Kalifornien. Ich habe eine Spur. Jemand hat mir geschrieben, eine Frau namens Helen. Sie sagt, sie kennt Emily. I froze. California, but I can't just leave. I have work, responsibilities. He stepped closer, and for the first time, took my hands in his with unexpected firmness. Olivia, you are the best thing that's happened to me since I set foot in this country. I don't just want you to translate, I want you there, as a friend, as a witness, as someone I trust. But your offer, I'm nobody. You're everything. Without you, I'd still be a lost old man with a suitcase full of regret. Tears welled up in my eyes. This wasn't just a trip. It was a chance to step out of the shadows, to stop being invisible. Ich muss darüber nachdenken, I said, trying to stay composed. He nodded, respectfully, but with a spark of hope in his eyes. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my life at the hotel, the grey days, Claire's cruel jokes, the bills stacked on my kitchen table. And I thought about Friedrich, the way he said my name, the way he trusted me without expecting anything in return. The next morning, I walked into the hotel with my backpack on my shoulders. Friedrich was in the lobby, as always. When he saw me, he smiled, a real smile, one I imagined he hadn't shown in years. Ich bin bereit. He took my hand gently. Dann lass uns gehen. And so, two invisible people set off into the unknown, chasing answers, redemption, and maybe something even greater. News of my trip with Friedrich spread through the hotel like wildfire. The morning after we left, my phone was already flooded with messages from co-workers. Some pretended to be concerned, others didn't bother to hide the bitterness. But the worst was yet to come. While we waited for our flight at Chicago's airport, I got a call from Claire. Olivia, are you out of your mind? Running off with a guest? With some rich old man? Her voice dripped with venom. I'm not running off, Claire. I'm helping someone, something you never knew how to do. Oh, please, how much is he paying you, huh? I bet that's why you learned German. Selling yourself for something. I swallowed my anger, took a deep breath. You never really saw me, Claire. Now you're just noticing because a rich man is finally listening to me. I'm just warning you. This is going to end badly. People like us don't get happy endings. I hung up without another word. Friedrich noticed my unease, even though he didn't understand the conversation. War das jemand aus dem Hotel? Ja, nur Maid. He gave a sad smile. People don't envy your happiness. They envy your freedom. We arrived in California by late afternoon. The heat was dry but somehow comforting. Friedrich rented a car, and we drove to a quiet residential neighborhood in Sacramento. The house was modest, with a neatly kept garden. That's where Helen lived, the woman who claimed to know Emily. She greeted us with surprise. Helen was in her early 60s, with greying hair tied in a low bun. She looked at Friedrich like she was seeing a ghost. Friedrich Weiss? My God, you actually came. See Ken and Emily? He asked, his voice full of hope. Helen invited us inside. The living room was filled with books and family photos. Emily worked with me at a laundry service here in Sacramento, back in the 90s. She showed up scared, on the run, never talked much about her past, but she did say her father had left her, that she never wanted to see him again. Friedrich bowed his head. Each word seemed to slice into him. Is she alive? I asked, trying to stay calm. Helen hesitated. The last time I saw Emily was in 2001. She was living out of a van with a little girl, said she was heading to Oregon, and I never saw her again. A daughter? Friedrich whispered, tears welling in his eyes. Yes, a beautiful girl. Must have been around 5 at the time. Silence settled in the room. Friedrich looked at me, as if searching for something to hold on to so he wouldn't collapse. So, I'm a grandfather, he murmured, like speaking directly to fate. And there, in the warmth of a stranger's home, with his soul laid bare and his heart in ruins, Friedrich realized that his search was bigger than he ever imagined. He wasn't just looking for a daughter anymore. He was now looking for an entire family. The revelation that Emily had a daughter changed everything. Friedrich didn't speak a word during the entire drive back to the hotel in Sacramento. His hands stayed tight on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road, as if he were driving through his own memories. It was already night when we arrived. The room was simple. One double bed, an armchair, and a lamp casting soft yellow light. I sat at the edge of the bed while he remained standing, staring out the window. Du bist ruhig, I said, breaking the silence. Ich habe sie nicht nur verloren, ich habe sie im Stich gelassen. Und jetzt weiß ich, dass ich auch ein Enkelkind verloren habe. The pain in his voice was hard to bear. I wanted so badly to hug him, but I held back. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook where we kept all our notes. Wir haben einen Hinweis. Wir wissen, dass sie nach Oregon ging. Wir finden sie. He finally turned to me. Warum hilfst du mir wirklich, Olivia? The question caught me off guard. Was meinst du? Ich bin ein alter Mann mit Schuld. Du hast nichts zu gewinnen. Warum? I took a deep breath, looked him straight in the eyes, because I know what it's like to be left behind. My mother was everything to me, but she was alone too, just like Emily, and maybe just like me. He stepped closer, sat down in the armchair and bowed his head. Ich vertraue dir mehr als jedem anderen Menschen auf dieser Welt. Dann lass uns nicht aufgeben. The next morning, we went to a local non-profit that helps people experiencing homelessness. Helen had told us that Emily used to visit shelters with her daughter. With the help of a social worker, we found a name listed in Oregon records from 2002, Emily Weiss, using a fake last name, Emily Carter. It sparked new hope, but it also brought tension. Back at the hotel, while planning our next steps, I got a call from Mr. Jenkins. Olivia, I'm calling as your employer. You left without formal authorization. Don't forget the hotel has strict policies. And one more thing. He paused, the tone sharp. There's been a complaint. Someone reported you're involved with a guest. Inappropriately. What? Claire submitted images of you with him. At the hotel. Even at the airport. She claims she's worried about the hotel's reputation. My stomach turned. Jenkins, I'm doing something important. This is bigger than job titles and name badges. Just know that if you don't return by Monday, you'll be terminated for job abandonment. I hung up, my hands shaking. Friedrich noticed right away. Was ist los? They want to fire me. Claire betrayed me. He clenched his fists, rose to his feet with surprising energy. Du wirst nicht zurückgehen, nicht so. Not to a world where you're invisible. I need that job. No, Olivia, you need respect, and you won't get it there. His voice was firm, but also freeing. For the first time, someone told me I deserved more. And for the first time, I started to believe it. We left for Oregon the next morning. The road was long, lined with dense forests and small towns with names that sounded like they came from children's books. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't empty. It was respectful. A quiet partnership, but it was heavy too. I could feel something approaching, and it wouldn't be easy. We arrived in Eugene, a small, tree-lined city with quiet streets and cozy corner cafes. According to the social records, a woman named Emily Carter had lived there in 2002, along with a daughter named Sarah. The name Sarah sounded like music to Friedrich's ears. Sarah, das ist mein Enkelkind, he repeated, like he was trying to memorize it. We stayed in a simple motel, far from the luxury he was used to. Friedrich didn't complain. He was focused, every minute more anxious, more restless. We visited churches, schools, libraries. We showed Emily's old photo to everyone. Some said she looked familiar. Most just shook their heads. After 3 days without a lead, Friedrich grew silent. His steps slowed, shoulders slumped. One morning, as we ate breakfast in the motel lobby, he didn't touch his plate. "Ich habe versagt," he whispered. "No, it's not over," I said, trying to lift his spirits. "I've waited my whole life, and now she's gone. And I'm tired, Olivia." "Then we rest today," I suggested. "We breathe, and tomorrow we start again." That afternoon, I let Friedrich sleep in the room and went for a walk alone. I wandered into a cafe and sat by the window. I pulled out my phone and, without thinking much, joined an online group for people searching for missing family members. I posted the old photo of Emily along with a short description. In English and in German. I didn't expect anything. I returned to the room after dark. Friedrich was still asleep, motionless. I lay down on the other bed, heart heavy. I wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe it really was too late. But then, at 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A notification from the online group. "That's my mum. I'm Sarah Carter. Who's looking for her?" My entire body froze. I sat up in bed, eyes wide. I looked over at Friedrich, still asleep, his face weary. I gently touched his shoulder. "Friedrich, wach auf. Ich glaube, ich habe Sarah gefunden." He opened his eyes slowly. When he saw my face, he sat up at once. "What did you say?" I showed him the message. He read it in silence, his hands trembling, then his eyes filled with tears. Sie liebt wirklich. We embraced there in the dark motel room, like two survivors in the middle of a storm. We were tired, we were scarred, but now finally we had something real, a thread of hope. The next morning, the sun looked different. The same grey Oregon sky now had a hint of gold. Friedrich buttoned up his blue shirt more carefully than usual. He was nervous. So was I. Sarah had replied to more messages during the night. She was polite, cautious, skeptical. She agreed to meet us in a park downtown, near a bookstore where she worked part-time. She said she wanted to hear the story before believing it. And who could blame her? After all, who would trust two strangers claiming they came because of a photograph taken over 30 years ago? Friedrich held Emily's photo in his hands as we walked to the bench where Sarah said she'd be waiting. From a distance, we saw a young woman sitting with her back to us. Brown hair pulled into a simple bun, worn jeans, a black jacket, an open book on her lap. "Das ist sie." "Die," Friedrich whispered, voice cracking. "No, that's Sarah, her daughter," I gently corrected, but I understood what he felt. She was the spitting image of her mother. We approached slowly. When she saw us, she stood up, slipping the book into her bag. "Are you Olivia and Friedrich?" "Yes," I replied, offering a warm smile. "Thank you for meeting us." She looked at Friedrich with a firm, assessing gaze. He, in turn, was visibly trembling. "Are you my grandfather?" Friedrich tried to speak, but emotion overtook him. Instead, he extended Emily's photo with shaking hands. "She was my daughter. I was a bad father, but I've regretted it every single day." Sarah looked at the photo in silence, then raised her eyes. "My mum always said she didn't have a father, that he gave up on her." "Ich habe sie nie vergessen," he whispered. Sarah crossed her arms, took a deep breath. Where were you when she needed you? The silence was heavy. Friedrich lowered his head. I stepped forward. He was lost, Sarah, and full of fear. But he came here alone from another country, not even knowing if you or your mother were still alive. He came to ask for forgiveness and to meet you. Sarah looked at me. There was anger in her eyes, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe even longing for something she never had. My mom died in 2015, cancer. She suffered a lot, but she never stopped talking about Munich, about Christmases there, about her father's accent, about the blue eyes she inherited. Friedrich began to sob. I've lost so much, but I'm here. If you'll let me, I want to be part of your life. Sarah hesitated. Then slowly, she stepped forward and extended her hand. We can start with coffee. Friedrich nodded, eyes brimming with tears. He held her hands gently with his own trembling ones. Ja, ein Kaffee klingt perfekt. There, in that simple park, 3 lives began to stitch themselves together. A broken story starting to mend, not through promises, but through presence. In the days that followed our meeting with Sarah, something changed in Friedrich. He seemed lighter, more awake. The weight of years filled with regret began to dissolve, and in its place grew a childlike will to live. Sarah, little by little, began to open up too. We had lunch together, took walks around the city, and listened to stories about Emily, both the good and the painful. Friedrich absorbed everything with a mix of sorrow and gratitude, like someone who accepts the past without needing to erase it. One afternoon, as Sarah said goodbye to head back to work, Friedrich pulled me aside for a more serious conversation. Ich muss zurück nach Chicago, he said. But I don't want you to go back to that hotel. Friedrich, I don't have another option. Yes, you do. You have me. He opened his leather briefcase one last time. Inside, an envelope. Inside the envelope, documents, stock certificates, official-looking paperwork, and a handwritten letter. I've made a decision. I want to invest my fortune into something that really matters, into you. I was speechless. He smiled with tenderness. I bought shares in your hotel, enough to have decision-making power, and I want you to run it. What? You know that place better than anyone. You've walked every hallway, cleaned every corner. You were invisible, and now you'll be seen. My heart nearly burst. Returning to the Empire Crest, not as a maid but as a manager, as a partner, as the face of a new era. 2 weeks later, I returned to Chicago. Claire nearly fell off her chair when she saw me walk through the lobby in navy blue heels and a tailored suit. Mr. Jenkins came toward me frowning, but his face went pale when I presented Friedrich's signed transfer of ownership. Good afternoon, Mr. Jenkins, I said with a calm smile. Starting today, we'll be making a few changes. Friedrich returned to Munich shortly after, carrying new photos of Sarah and the grandson she'd had years after Emily passed. But he left behind something greater than money. He left me a new path. We renovated the hotel. We hired more people like me, people who had never been seen. We created inclusive policies, open space for voices ignored for decades. And Claire, she resigned a month later. As for me, well, I still make tea, but now I make a point of serving it personally to the newly hired staff. And I always say, sometimes a cup of tea can change an entire life. My name is still Olivia, but today, when people look at me, they no longer just see a cleaning lady. They see a woman who dared to listen, who dared to speak, who dared to believe. And it all started with a cup of tea and the courage to remember a forgotten language. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if I'd stayed quiet that day in the lobby, if I had just mopped the floor and ignored that confused foreign man. But something inside me refused to be invisible at that moment. Maybe it was my mother whispering to me. Maybe it was God. Maybe destiny. Friedrich showed me that even the most broken people can begin again. Sarah taught me that pain can become a bridge if you have the courage to cross it. And I've learned that our past doesn't define us. but what we choose to do with it absolutely does. Today, when I walk the halls of the Empire Crest, I see other Olivias and Friedrichs passing by, people with invisible stories, quiet pain, and dreams tucked deep in their pockets. And I make it a point to stop, look them in the eye, and ask if they'd like a cup of tea, because I believe in fresh starts, in second chances, and in stories that deserve to be told. If you've made it this far, it means you believe too. So leave a comment below. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever changed someone's life with a simple gesture? I want to hear your story. And of course, subscribe to the channel, because together we'll keep sharing stories the world needs to see. Thank you for listening to mine.